I wrote my first book. It's called The Great Divide. And it's also probably my last book because it's tough to write a book. This is a book about the next 25 years in the world and the United States. And the hypothesis was that not everyone is going to prosper in terms of economics and in terms of population, the demographics, but there's a select group of states and countries that are really going to do well. And that's why I've called this the Great Divide. There are three things basically, as we look over the next 25 years, that are going to make all the difference. One is oil, and we can see today with oil prices down in the 30s, which is incredible because 2 years ago it was 100. And it has to do with politics. It has nothing to do with oil. It has to do with the Saudis and the U.S. trying to bankrupt Russia and Iraq. Because Russia, 50% of their revenues is oil. And when you drop the price from $100 to $37 a barrel, they can't survive. And that's going to have an amazing political ramification over the next few years. Interest rates are another fascinating thing. Interest rates effectively around the world are zero. If you buy a 30-year bond in Sweden, you pay the bank 20 points to hold your money. And we are in a situation where the world has so much cash that nobody pays interest on the money. And they talk about raising the federal funds rate 0.25%. I don't know why they're doing that. It's completely irrelevant. But if that makes them feel good at the Fed, so be it. But the basic point is, this is going to be the longest period of low interest rates the world has ever seen. And it's really pretty remarkable. So, if you want to buy a house today, to think you can get a 5-year teaser rate at like 3.25%, 3.5%, pretty amazing. So interest rates have a lot to do with what goes on around the world in terms of business and real estate, which happens to be my particular niche. And the final thing is demographics, which is really the heart of the book. Demographics, first of all, is easy because once someone is born, you basically can tell their path for their whole life. And all you have to do is look at who their parents are. And that works very well because when you look at the demographics around the world, you begin to see that the demographics define what the economies of the countries are and where they're going. Now, in terms of a gross national product, gross national income, North America, Canada, US, and Mexico have over 1/3 of the entire worldwide dollar pie. Europe has 22%, and remember that 22%, because when we look at the world here, we see that the US by far outshines anyone with a give or take $17 trillion GNP. China's in second place, Japan's in third, and then everybody else is sort of down around the bottom. But let's go back to the 22%. Europe has 22% now of the gross national income. But when you look over the three censuses of 1980 to 1910, Europe only has 11% of the population gain. And I will tell you, that is the primary reason why Europe has been in a funk and will continue to be in a funk, because they're not growing. They literally stopped having kids at the end during World War II, and it's never come back. Because in the world of economics, the formula is you have to have 2 kids for 2 parents. So you have to have the 2.0 ratio. If you don't have that, your economy collapses. And I'm talking about the industrialized world. So here in North America, we have 36% of the gross national income, but we also have 42% of the population gain. So we're in great shape. Europe's in terrible shape, and the other nations I'll talk about just a little bit. When you look out to the population projections to the year 2050, there are only 2 nations in the world that have a significant population gain. It's the United States, and that's India. China will have a net loss, and they have a net loss because 30 years ago, they introduced the wonderful one-child policy. So here we come 30 years later, and we look at China. They have 1.4 males for every 1 female. Don't ask how that happens. It wasn't luck. But now you have all these millennials who are supposed to be getting married one-on-one and spending on consumer goods and buying houses and buying cars, and they're not there. So you have a very dysfunctional society, and their growth in terms of consumer goods spending is incredibly low. And they have to have consumer spending to make their economy work. Here in the United States, 2/3 of our entire economy is consumer spending, and that's true in most of the industrialized countries in the world. They're down right now at about 40% because their people are not spending money because they're not having enough people getting married. So they're in terrible shape. But India is going to do very well. And you'll see, as you follow the numbers over the next quarter century, that India will actually catch up with China in terms of their gross national income, which is amazing. Demographics. One of the things that is not good for a country is to have too high of a percentage of people over the age 65. Well, Japan is pushing a median age, they're just about to hit 50, which is incredible. We're at 37, which is about a nice normal range. It's apocryphal, but they say in Japan there are more seniors who buy diapers than for babies. And it's close. But there are other countries, you can see that when you look at Germany, Italy, France, Spain, United Kingdom, they all have a very, very heavy proportion of their population that's over 65. And think of the ramifications of what that means in terms of the government providing health care, welfare services, and all the things that seniors need that require massive amounts of money that are supposed to be provided by the young people in the workforce. But if the young people in the workforce are not there, then the governments have severe problems. So we in the United States are just about where we should be. We're doing just fine. Now, the millennials, we're doing a great job on. I will tell you, and once again, it's demography. It's a given. This is how the millennials will grow over actually the next 20 years. We have this enormous number of people who are going into the 18 to 34-year-old range who will get married, buy a house, have kids, buy furniture, spend a lot of money, go on vacations, and the economy of the United States is pretty much a given that it's going to be in rather amazingly good shape the next 20 years. I mean, you can see it. It happens. It's happening now. Even in our recession, we had an amazing spending pattern. The recession, unfortunately, basically fell on the back of blue collars. The unemployment rate for professionals was under 4% during the recession. So when we look out the next few years, next couple of decades actually, in the US, we got a lot of spending going on. And it's really interesting. I did an analysis of the spending pattern during the recession of Bentleys, Rolls, Beamers, Mercedes, Nordstroms. You look at all their stock, they didn't know from a recession. They had a minor dip, but it didn't relate to what everyone else had. So the yuppies did very well during the recession, and California in particular, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Now, this is one of my favorite slides. 2/3 of millennials have no hardline phones. Doesn't exist. 60% of Hispanics, 32% of baby boomers, and half of us living in the West don't have a hardline phone. And there's a footnote to this that's sort of funny. The unemployment rate in this country is tabulated by phone calls every month to 370,000 people on hardline phones. The Bureau of Labor Statistics misses virtually everyone under the age of 35, misses all the Hispanics. It's basically an old white guy unemployment rate. Okay, now, let's turn to the United States and what's happening here. 15 of the 50 states have 3/4 of the entire population gain in the nation. The other 35 states don't count. You sort of throw them away. It's sort of like Albania. It fills a spot. It fills a spot on a map. But other than that, it doesn't mean much. So, I mean, if you're in business, you have to concentrate on the big 15. There they are. That white outline is Albania. Okay? So basically, you start at the great state of Washington and work all the way around the map and go up to the great city of Washington. And that's where all the actions go. Literally, 3/4 of all the action in terms of economics, generation, and population gain are going to be in those 15 states. That happens to be a 40-year pattern. And trends are really difficult to change. And there usually is a reason for the trend. Now, a lot of people have said there are not going to be jobs for the next generation because of robotics and all sorts of things. There are 50 million people that are going to leave the workforce between 2002 and 2022, and they're going to have to be replaced. So we are creating an enormous amount of jobs today to fulfill these folks who are leaving. And when we look at where those jobs are, lo and behold, almost 3/4 of them are in those same 15 states. And that's the way it's just going to be. It is not going to change. When we were in the depth of the recession, I wanted to do an analysis that showed which states would come out of the recession first and strongest. So we did an analysis, and it came out that we divided the states into two types. One were systemics, and the other were cyclical. Systemic states are states that have something wrong with their economic system. And we have Louisiana, Michigan, that group, okay? and then you have cyclical. Cyclical states are states that go up and down, but they always bounce back, and they bounce back higher than they were from the last time they were high. And far left is Nevada, next to that's Arizona, California's right in the middle. And lo and behold, that's exactly what happened. Those 15 states that are in green are the ones that have bounced back and done extremely well. In our beloved California, in the last 4 years, we've added 1.4 million jobs, 350,000 jobs a year. It's an incredible job machine that we have here in this state. And you have to consider that within the realm of the fact that our elected officials are, pretty much well, let's leave that alone. Nonetheless, let's just say they're not generally pro-business. Larry Summers, who was president of Harvard and Treasury Secretary, not one of my favorite people, but he's very bright. And he is now advising Silicon Valley companies. And he was interviewed in Fortune last year, and he said, do you sense the air is different in the Silicon Valley? And he said, there's an enormous rejection of constraints. And I will tell you, and it has to, this is the perfect crowd to talk about this, because Californians reject constraint. They're creating things where people said they couldn't be created. And that is what has made this state just an enormous powerhouse. It's not only their great universities, but it's the thought process that goes behind it, and the fact that we reject constraint. I found this word. I don't even know if I can pronounce it right, but the reality is Messianism is a fear of change or innovation. In California, we do not fear change, and we don't fear innovation. So that's why California is really about as good as it gets when it comes to economics and when you look at over the next 25 years. In economics, really very basic. Every time you add one basic job in the economy, you add two support jobs. The basic job is an economic driver. Definition is the money comes from outside the metropolitan area. So here in San Diego, obviously Navy, which is 20% of our economy, manufacturing, tourism, import, export, biotech, they're all basic industries and they're all flourishing. They're doing quite well. And as a result of that, our economy, both here and in the rest of the state, I was in San Francisco last weekend, and it was an incredible mob scene. I mean, people just struggling, carrying bags out of Macy's, but the economy in this state is just remarkable, and you can see it in retailing, you see it in car sales, you see it all across the board. This state is doing very, very well. Our San Diego County, we came in number 3 in venture capital spending last year. Fort Lauderdale's a fluke. It'll drop out in 2015. We will be number 2 in the nation of any county in terms of venture capital spending. Needless to say, San Jose, Silicon Valley, will be number 1 with 10 times what we do in this county. But nonetheless, we will be number 2 in the nation. So we can be pretty proud of our country. Our payroll for DOD, we are tied with Virginia for being number 1 in the nation. And that's a rather large part of the California economy. And it's only going to grow because the dollars from the Defense Department are essentially all being put into the Navy. And there are only 4 places in the Navy in this country, 2 on the East Coast, 2 on the West Coast, and we've got the big dog. We're it. And especially when we look at the future engagements that we're going to have militarily, we don't expect Europe to attack us, in other words. Okay. Now for the big hurrah. My parents were the first generation, part of the first generation in world history to have net worth. It did not exist as a concept because there wasn't any. But my parents had life insurance. My father was with Metropolitan Life. We had life insurance, pension funds, life savings. My folks owned a home. They paid it off in the first 2 years that they had it because they didn't believe in debt. And they had a business, which they sold, resulting in my parents having real live net worth. Well, I will tell you that over the next quarter of a century, millennials are going to inherit $40 trillion in this country. And they're going to spend every damn dime of it. And they will. And that's why when you see the spending that goes on in this country, and it will continue for better quality goods, better quality housing, cruises, vacations, $300 tennis shoes, things like that. These are people who know money's coming their way, and they're going to. How's my time? Okay. Well, that's good, because that happens to be my last slide. America is the mattress of the world. The money all comes here. It will continue to come here. And we have a very nice quarter century ahead of us. Thank you.